your girl, Father Longlegs. You know me, Daddy T. This is You Can Tell Me Anything, and we're back with a new season, and I'm so excited to introduce my guest today. She's super funny. You definitely need to follow her on Twitter if you're not already. I'm going to read a tweet of hers that I think is very... All of her tweets are funny. I couldn't, just find one, but... I don't know who needs to hear this, but you weren't gifted. Your parents were just narcissists who couldn't accept that they'd given birth to an overwhelmingly average child. That one rings really true to me because I feel like it is also why I'm so disappointed in myself as an adult. But give it up for Dana Donnelly.
Hi.
What's up? I know we were just talking about this offline, but we just found out seconds ago that we're from the same hometown.
I know, that's so insane. It's
so
so weird because I'm like, so many people are from the Bay, but not that many people are from Palo Alto, and I feel like I know everyone who's from Palo Alto.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
what a fun discovery.
And also, I feel like really makes this tweet hit harder because if you're from Palo Alto or you know Palo Alto, that is some shit. Yeah.
Well, it was funny because I was talking to my friend the other day, and she was talking about how she thought she was dumb her whole life because her parents made her take really hard math classes, and she was like, it's crazy that I literally figured out that I wasn't dumb last year, and it's we're 25. She's like, no, I didn't know I wasn't dumb until last year. Crazy.
Yeah, that really resonates with me. I've always hesitated to be I feel dumb, but because I know that sounds really arrogant, but I remember our college counselor telling us in high school, if you're not 1% or the top student your teacher has seen in 10 years, you're not going to get into an Ivy. And I remember calculating all the people around me in my class and being I know I'm not the top student my teacher's seen in 10 years. I was just I think I'm just average. And then I got really depressed about it. And now I'm it's not how it works. You just over time build your passion. But
we're literally from a suicide high school city.
Yeah. I've talked about it in the pod. My little brother, also was one of those clusters, which it's his anniversary coming up this weekend. So I'm actually getting a tattoo of him today. Not of him. That would be wild and insane. No, in memory of him. But this isn't about me. It's about you, Dana. And I like to start with a good confession just to have a positive note to start on. Is there something good you'd like to confess?
Oh, a good thing I'd like to confess?
This is just the little humble brag icebreaker. It could be it should be positive, but it could be something you really enjoy doing or something that you're excited about or something you've done recently that you're proud of. Just so we can get to know you.
I finally learned how to cook salmon in the oven.
Whoa.
Which I didn't know how to do, but now I do.
like full on fillet?
Yeah, well, just getting a fucking thing of salmon at the grocery store and making it, I guess.
That's pretty cool. I tried to do that, the bake the salmon, and it's never the right. I can't. It's always too soft. I can't get it to be the right texture.
Interesting. Yeah, I think it's definitely trial and error. I've done 3 at this point, and I'm only now feeling I know how to do it.
That is quite a flex. I do feel you are much younger than me, which I won't bring up again, but no. But I feel I still barely. It was quarantine that kind of forced me to try to learn to cook. So you're already ahead of the game. I feel like you're in a good place.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, we were talking about Palo Alto and suicide, so this is a good segue into, I always ask my guests, which you know this because you've heard it, but this podcast was kind of inspired by me going to therapy because I didn't have access to that as a kid until I was, an adult in New York. So I like to ask my guests, what's your experience with therapy? Do you go, or what's your relationship in terms of kind of self-care and mental health?
So I started going to therapy pretty young. I think I was in 7th or 8th grade just because I had a really severe eating disorder in middle school. I was kind of an anorexia prodigy,
wow.
I kind of was really ahead of that. I was really young.
Damn.
Really young to have such a severe eating disorder. But I started going because I literally the doctor was you have to go to therapy, and my parents were very anti-therapy. They're both, my mom's Filipino Catholic, my dad was Irish Catholic, and they're both very therapy is navel gazing, really just very negative about it. But because my medical doctor was no, she needs to be seeing a therapist, they were okay. And then from that point on, I was in therapy pretty much all of middle school, all of high school. on and off in college, and then I
Was it like a school
had a
counselor
therapist.
or like
What?
was it a school counselor or like a private?
No, I was
Okay.
seeing like just like specialized, like specifically psychologists who specialized in like adolescent eating disorders,
Gotcha.
pretty much. And then I did have a therapist until like a year and a half ago because she just like was kind of giving me a weird vibe, and I just haven't been since. But
You have you just remind me you do have I think this tweet is probably one of the ones that's gone around and memed a lot, but you have a really funny tweet about your therapist, which I've always wondered if it's true. It's the one where you made her more insecure and then you're like, my work here is done.
she's like, I mean, we had a lot of like weird moments where I'm like, what am I doing here? Like, do you know what I mean? Where she would just like say things, and I'm like, I don't know, man. She would give me really weird vibes.
Interesting. Yeah, not all therapists aren't like superheroes. I think it is about finding the right one. Some of them may just not be good, and that's totally true.
Yeah.
And some might be like a good vibe for someone else. But
Right.
yeah.
I think it's all about finding the right fit. I think it's also just kind of like I needed to stop seeing middle-aged white women
Yeah.
because they all also kind of have, I think it's just the generation, but they're all like a little pick-me. Like they're all a little like, here's what you can do to make your boyfriend like you more, as opposed to like dump your boyfriend. Like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I've been like really exploring, just thinking outside. This isn't what I can't figure out a better word to say this, but outside the binary. But I don't mean it in like a gender sense or a computer sense. I mean it like even the way therapists are like, oh, if this isn't working, do this opposite. But the reality is like there's obviously a third or fourth or fifth, whatever option. It's the same with like political parties when it's like if everyone on both sides agrees that both sides suck, then by default there is another side, and nobody seems to understand that. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And it's like really frustrating. I think like my therapist said something. Well, first of all, I was complaining about how my ex-boyfriend, he is like a white man in Hollywood or whatever, and he was complaining about like how affirmative action has made it harder for him to get work. And I'm like, that's just not true.
I've definitely
And so
dated men like this, and it's sad because I know
Yeah.
it's not even the same one, but it's
Right, I know exactly. I'm like, they're rampant. They're everywhere. They're everywhere. And I was just like complaining about that, and she was like, it actually is harder for white men to get hired. And I'm like, yeah, than it used to be, but not compared to minorities. Like that's just not true.
They just mean it's harder for me, like that right now, to get hired than if I were here earlier. And it's like that's
right. If I had been here 10 years ago, I would have had a job. And I'm like, yeah, that's probably true. But that's only because the system was so unfairly rigged against you, where now it's only like kind of unfairly rigged against you.
Yeah. It's also, I mean, nobody ever uses that example for other industries where, I mean, there's talent in this industry, but I feel like people don't factor it in the way they do with like sports or music. Because if you think about it, we've always evolved as a society to get stronger and better because we have foundational like classics to build off of. Nobody is sitting around being like, wow, if I was a painter in Monet's day, like all I have to do is make it blurry and I would have been
like literally, yeah. I'm like, that's the whole thing. It's like it's a time and place thing, and that is a factor.
Yeah, like you can't just be like it's
people...
because you're white. It's because you're not original anymore, and it's not because of your race. It's just
the white man comedian has already been done like a million times. Like, maybe people are bored.
Damn, that's so true. I'm curious about your experience with therapy in middle school because a lot of people I know who've started in school had to go to like school therapists and didn't have great experiences. Did you feel like were you actually able to work through things, or was it kind of just like a routine you went to, and like were you actually like actively changing behaviors?
It's so weird because I think it definitely gave me a lot of tools with which to modify my own behaviors, and I think it was really helpful in that it made me like very introspective, and it kind of like helped me develop an initial self-awareness, and like I think I learned how to articulate my own feelings and emotions. And honestly, I think it was helpful. Like I think that I definitely benefited from going to therapy for so long.
That's awesome. I mean, you are very self-aware, and I think that's what makes your comedy hit so hard because it's like you're making fun, but it's not just yes, I don't know, it's just like it's not punching punching down, but it's punching
like punching inward. Yeah. Like I think like all of my comedy is literally just about me. Like it's just one-liners about myself. And I think like that is something that therapy gave me the ability to do, where it's like the kind of thing where when you're talking for a really long time, you start to notice like your own oxymorons and your own contradictions, and like the way in which you like aren't consistent, and like that's what is funny, I think.
Yeah, that's what you're describing too is like It's weird because I've been thinking a lot like a computer lately, and it's probably just because I've been alone, which is, I guess, ironic and inconsistent, speaking of binary, because they think in binary. But I do think it's how computers train themselves is by establishing patterns and looking at them. And over time, you do actually notice, oh, I've been doing this for a long time. Maybe let me try this. But you can't always see it until you've built up data, which is why it's harder as a student in like elementary school to have those like drastic changes. But I think, like you're saying, you probably caught up faster by the time you were in your 20s.
Right, exactly. Like, I think it became easier to quickly, like, analyze, like, my behavior and, like, figure out what was working for me and what wasn't. Like, I think I got a lot better at making changes faster, and I think that is so, like, something I may have not had, like, as a result of that. Like, I, like, would get better and better at, like, ending relationships sooner when I noticed that they weren't working, and I got better at, like, stopping doing certain activities sooner when I realized, like, I wasn't enjoying them, and I think it's, like, that kind of thing.
That one's so important, the relationship one. It took me a lot. I mean, when I was your age, I was definitely had not learned that. So, but it took me until like, you can't just like, people will tell you like, do this, do that. And then I would think I want to listen, but until your body knows it, you truly, it does like, I don't know if it makes sense, but like, for example,
no,
like,
I know. It's like
texting back like fuckboys or like going back to an ex, you know, deep down you're not supposed to, but if you don't actually know why, it's still going to feel bad when you don't go back to them. Like, you're going to feel like you missed out. I think
it's like the cognitive dissonance between like what you know is good for you and what you want is like so much.
Yeah.
And like, I think it's like, it's so weird because I didn't really realize it until like my last serious relationship where I was just in it for way too long. Yeah. Like, I was in it for like probably like 8 months longer than I should have been because I knew when it wasn't working. But it's like, it was so hard for me to like, for some reason, it was so hard for me to end it. And I think after that finally ended and I felt so much better so quickly, I was like, oh, sometimes I don't know what I want, and sometimes like I just have to acknowledge to myself something's not working and break a pattern, even if I don't know that that's the problem.
Right, because the reality is you shouldn't, but if it helps, you can always go back to it if leaving wasn't right.
Like it's
like, why not try it?
It'll be there.
It's the same. Like I like to visualize now like in physical terms, because I think about like how animals, when they're like fight or flight and have to run away, they don't analyze all of this. So I just think like, okay, if I'm trapped in a house with a killer, but I don't know what's out there, like I just woke up in the house, if I stay in the house, I'm in the house with the killer. Like, I might go outside, it might be dangerous, but if I know for sure I'm in a house with a killer, I might as well try to leave. Like, it could be worse, but it definitely, I definitely will die if I stay. So I might as well try.
It's like kind of just like make a choice.
Yes.
Like make any choice. Like, it's like, it doesn't, sometimes it's like, it doesn't even have to be the right one, but it's like the kind of thing where you're eliminating possibilities. So it's like kind of thing, if I had broken up with my boyfriend and then I was still really miserable, I could have been like, oh, well, I guess it wasn't my boyfriend. Let me now look at other things. Like,
that's
or whatever.
So smart. That's like an extra step, because I feel like for a while I'd just be like, I guess I made the wrong choice. But you're like, I guess there's something else instead of going back. You keep going.
Exactly. Yeah. And I'm like, there's always something, there's always like, you can always like figure out what's wrong by like making changes.
Yeah. That's so well put. I'm curious, do you write or did you, when you were growing up, write in a diary?
No, I never wrote in a diary. Just like never consistently. I think I'm just like the kind of person where I find my own like earnest thoughts really like cringy. Like, I still haven't gone to the point, and I think that's something like maybe that comes with age, but I still haven't gotten to the point where I feel comfortable like earnestly expressing anything, at least in writing. Well, which is so weird because like I'm a writer.
Well, in a way, yes and no. Like, I feel like you probably had, because you probably grew up with more access to social media, so you probably were able to get that out. Like, because I didn't have a therapist, I wrote a lot in diaries, and it is very cringy. But when I go back and read it, it feels like it was like my therapist, because I'll be like, I don't know why I feel like this. And then sometimes I'll sort it out. Like, when I reread it, I'll be like, I think I do this because that. So it's really interesting. Like, I don't know. I think people who don't have access to mental health, like experts, if at the very least writing down your thoughts and burying them somewhere will help you like untangle it.
I mean, I think definitely too, probably part of the reason I never needed to journal was because like I had an hour a week where I like said everything that I was feeling and thinking. So it was almost like I had like therapy as an alternative to journaling.
Yeah. That's cool. Well, speaking of expression and journaling, Dana, is there anything you'd like to tell me?
Oh, is this the big confession?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so I was looking at your past ones. Okay, I used to be really into like fake IDs,
Ooh.
and I used to like make people like these Texas temporary licenses, and they like
Whoa.
usually worked. Yeah.
Damn. So you were not just into them so you were like wheeling and dealing them.
Well, okay, so I would order in bulk for people, so that was like something I
Okay.
did was I would like organize like fake ID group orders
Wow,
because I
business
like
lady.
I know. Well, I found like a subreddit that was like all about fake IDs, and I would just like
How
make sure
old were
everyone
you
had
when you started doing this? Are you the
15.
oldest of your
Yeah,
siblings?
I'm the
Okay.
oldest in my family. Yeah. I was 15.
Okay.
And it was just the kind of thing where like I feel like I didn't really have like a thing and I was kind of lost. I was also on a lot of weird medications early in
Hmm.
high school just because of the therapy which like
Hmm.
led to psychiatry which ultimately
Gotcha.
was not very good for me, but like whatever, I guess.
Well, it's so hard with
Um,
teenagers because they're literally changing, and it's really hard to
right.
get medications right. I mean, I'm not saying that people
Yeah.
shouldn't seek help, but it gets fucked up really easily because of that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I also think like I think it's a little better now, but when I was like being treated and stuff, they
Hmm.
still didn't have very many like regulations with
Hmm.
pharmaceutical companies in the like medical industry. So like my doctors were essentially being like bribed by
Ugh,
psychiatrists to prescribe certain things
damn.
or by pharmacists,
Yeah,
pharmaceutical
yeah.
companies. Yeah.
Yeah, and psychiatrists are built in this way where they only really prescribe. Like the one that I go to is just there to prescribe. And like anytime I try to bring up like, oh, I went to this dermatologist because I think it's affected to my mental health, she's like, okay, talk to your therapist about that. And I'm like, but your job, like they're just trying to be like,
Yeah.
so what do you need? Let me write it up. And I'm
Yeah, well
always
they're
like, I don't
trying to
want
like
it. Like I don't want
yeah, they want you to
drugs.
like come in with a diagnosis so that they can like give you medication.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like that is so bizarre to me because I'm like it's just such an I mean psychiatry as an industry is like very weird because yeah,
Yeah.
they're prescribing things for mental illness but they don't really like ever
They
get
don't
to
try
know
to,
you.
yeah, it's very, yeah. I mean, I think that we're shifting into a different age soon, I hope, because I do feel like these conversations are being had earlier and earlier. But like one
Yeah.
stupid example I'll give is like, I have a theory and it's not random, but at least for myself, it makes sense. And I think other people have shown signs of this, but like allergies and depression are correlated in some way and not just like
Interesting.
I don't know how like quite what it is yet, but it's all immune
Hmm.
related. But for me
Yeah.
specifically, like when I had the worst vitiligo and psoriasis, which is they're both immune, like I guess they're both caused by immune
Yeah.
deficiencies, but
Hmm.
they're one is or they're both skin things. But then I would also get depressed and anxious, and then found out I had ADHD, so I had to treat all these things, and I started realizing like these are all connected and they all flare up together. But when I brought it
Yeah.
up, my psychiatrist was like, "Well, I don't know about that." But then she was like, "Well, if you have a panic attack, I can prescribe this antihistamine." And I was like, "You're literally talking about an
Or
allergy med."
allergies.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, but it is interesting because I'm like, Western medicine is so not holistic
Yeah.
that things like that happen. I just remember I had this cyst on my tailbone. And it was just like this
Brag,
horrible cyst. It's
okay.
called a pill. Yeah, thank you. Sorry to flex. I have this cyst on my tailbone. It's called a pillonoidal cyst. It's something like only like truckers get. Like it's
Whoa.
basically something you get from sitting down too much.
Uh-huh.
So I was like sitting down too
Damn.
much and I was passing out because there was literally like pressure point on on my tailbone,
Wow.
and I kept passing out. And I went to the emergency room, and I was like. And he was like, "Why do you think you passed out?" And I was like, "There's a massive cyst on my tailbone." And he looked at it and he was like, "I don't think that's why you're passing out, but I'll prescribe antibiotics for it." And then I went home. I passed out again. I went to urgent care. They were like, "Oh, you're definitely passing out because of the cyst."
Oh my god.
But I'm like, why wouldn't? It's just so bizarre to me that like it's like you wouldn't like try to link those
Yeah,
things.
and I mean that's another issue of doctors just not believing women. Like there's like so many
Yeah.
statistics showing that, but it is like your
Ugh.
body. You should know.
Yeah, it's like I
your
know.
instincts
I'm like,
are
no,
there.
no, no. This like painful cyst is making me pass out. It's so painful. I'm passing out.
The
Like
doctor's like, well, I don't have a cyst and I pass out, so that can't be it. That's like, oh my gosh.
literally. Ugh.
He's like, let me tell you about affirmative action. And
It's the only thing they want to talk about.
I want to know more about. It's funny because not knowing where you're from is the same hometown as me. It's very interesting because it's like very suburban, and I remember like my high school we went to a lot of house parties, but I never needed a fake ID. So were you like going to bars or just buying alcohol for
No,
people?
I started buying alcohol for other people. like pretty early on, and we would always go to these house parties in like Menlo Park and Atherton, and they would just give me, okay, so basically they would give
all the
me
rich
every
kids live
weekend.
there.
Yeah, no, I'm like, it's so funny because Palo Alto is rich, but it's
But
like
it's
we
different.
refer
It's
to
like
like
the hills versus
we were like no, Woodside kids are rich. Like we're like no, we're Woodside kids are rich. So, but they would give me at the beginning of every weekend, they would just give me $400 cash.
Damn.
And they would be like, get 330 racks and like 2 handles, and I could get any brand. And so that like literally cost like $90, and I would pocket like $300 every weekend.
Damn.
Just from like buying these kids alcohol.
Man, and it's probably not even their money anyways, it's their parents, so it's like
exactly
there's no
like
guilt
they
there.
didn't care. It was nothing to them. So
that's wild. It's funny because I'm like on one hand I'm like, wow, this sounds very like Euphoria, but on the other hand, knowing Paul, I'm like, it's definitely not. But it's just like driving up to a house up a windy road and then like partying at a big
it's
mansion.
like a bunch of kids playing beer pong in a really beautiful house.
Yeah, that's so wild. So I mean, so much has probably changed since I went to high school there, but what like were you scared? Because when I think about like how I felt in high school doing anything illegal, like I don't know if the internet has changed it because you said you found it on subreddit and having other people, but like how did you make the jump from like, oh, I want to drink alcohol to like, I'm going to order something online and like start dealing these things to people?
I think it was kind of like I was like really suicidal for a really long time. And so I think
I'm glad you made it.
What?
I'm glad you made it through.
Thank you. Me too. I'm amazed I did. But I had a certain amount of like flippantness for like my own life in a way that I think made it so that like if I wanted something, I was like, I'm just going to get it.
A little bit of like compulsive behavior.
Oh, definitely. Like it was just the kind of thing where I like didn't really think about consequences because I was like, well, it doesn't really matter. Like I'll just kill myself.
Were you hoping to have, well, I know on the surface, that definitely comes from needing like to address something, but you're not sure how to address it. But were you were you ever hoping like for consequences? Like did they heighten like your choices ramp up to like more and more risky, or was it all just kind of random?
I don't think so. I think it was kind of random. It was just like things like if a thought entered my head, it became something I needed to do. And I'm still like that. Yeah. Like I'm still like if a thought enters my head or an idea enters my head, I'm like, no, I have to do this and I have to do it now. And I've always been like that. So it's kind of like just like an idea is planted and like suddenly I'm like figuring out how to like order fake IDs.
Do you like researching things a lot?
I do. I really like looking into things. I'm like a natural, like I'm very curious and I love information. Like we were talking about this, but it's like I love data. I love just like reading shit. Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah, because I was diagnosed with ADHD as an adult, but I keep getting these TikToks. I'm like, oh, I don't. It's like TikTok is like my subconscious reflected to me in a way where
it literally is. It's like the algorithm is so crazy and specific. I love it, but I'm also like,
but it's scary because I'm like, I don't talk about this, but I mean, I do on this pod, but it's not on my TikTok. But I keep getting ones about like, if you're an adult with ADHD or you're a gifted kid, this is what happens. And it's a lot of like, you need to spend a lot of time researching. You have to give like presentations to prove your point. Make sure that like, you know, if someone thinks that you've done something wrong, that's like, you actually like do all the data and research and like figure out what everyone said and what they think. And you're like,
literally,
it's like solving a mystery.
It drives me crazy too, because I realize like, especially just with like when like people on Twitter are like really mean in general.
No, really?
But like a lot of
yes,
like yeah. But it's like it's gotten to the point where like I'm like I've finally realized, there's no comeback or like there's no amount of like presentation of fact that I can do to make you guys not hate me. Like you've already made up your mind.
But they don't hate you. That's the secret. Is a lot of people, that's the favorite thing of their day is like trolling. And so if they like it, it's like in a way I'm like, oh, you're getting joy out of this. So actually like totally have fun, I guess. I don't know. Like
yeah, totally. But it just like it still hurts my feelings.
Yes, yeah.
Totally. And so I think it's like I used to be so intent on like proving like here's why I'm right and here's why what you're saying doesn't make sense. But I'm like I've finally gotten to a point where like I don't necessarily need to do that anymore. Like I can kind of just accept that like
there's a degree of I feel like some people probably do need a little pushback, but I think interestingly like connecting this to your high school experience, like it's the reality is everyone has this different life and different experience. Like you are probably right and know all the facts of your life, and you've spent a lot of time looking inward, so you're very aware of yourself. Whereas these people, it's not that they're just flat out wrong, but they're probably right based on all the facts they have. and they're not willing to see more. So in a way, like that makes it feel less like there's only one right or wrong, because their experience is totally different than yours.
Right, exactly. And like it's also just weird because it's like whenever I guess it's like therapy has given me the tools to like ask myself before I say anything, why am I saying this? Like where is it coming from?
Yeah.
What is my desired outcome? I'm always like, oh, what is my desired outcome before I like do anything or like say anything? Like what am I trying to get from saying this or whatever? And I'm like, but like other people don't do that.
Yeah.
Like, do you know what I mean? And so I'm like, it's very hard for me sometimes to like empathize with people who don't have the exact same knowledge that I have.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, but I am thinking about like where this is coming from. And when you're tweeting something that's clearly you projecting, you're not even thinking about the possibility that you could be projecting. Like that didn't even enter your mind.
They're not as self-aware. But I would say like having been someone who's changed and become more self-aware, I don't think I was ever like a troll like that, but just about myself, I feel like I used to put myself down more. I do think that maybe they're on the journey. I don't know. Now I just don't bother as much. I'm like, hopefully they're in their little, like hopefully by setting an example, just like doing the thing I want to do and living positively, then more people will like bump up against that and see that and try that. But it is tough because you really want to just like reach out your hand and be like, let me teach you what I have learned to not feel so bad. But
right.
Yeah. Were you like a party girl in high school? I don't know. Pally seemed always like cooler when Gun was like full of nerds, very much.
Yeah, I mean, I think Gun was full of nerds too when I was like at Pally. Like, I think we were like, no, Gun kids are weird. I think like I started getting more into partying, quote unquote, like my junior year of high school. Like my freshman and sophomore year of high school, I don't even really remember because I was like on a lot of medications that were like really like fucking with my memory and like my ability to like do anything or want to do anything. I don't remember like trying to hang out with friends at all in 10th grade. Like I don't remember anything. And like I don't remember being particularly social or having a desire to be social. Like
was it coming from we don't have to get too into like anything you don't want to, but like where was it coming from more like needing attention and control, or was it image based, like in terms of like when you were having the eating disorder?
I mean, okay, so I gained a lot of weight because of this medication in maybe like 9th or 10th grade, and I could definitely tell that I had like gained a lot of weight, but like it was also like I was on a bunch of medications that made me like not care that much, but it also just made me like just want to withdraw and like not talk to anyone and like not look at anyone. It was like very much like I don't want to be perceived.
Gotcha.
Like, and I just like stopped going to school at some point because I was like, I don't really want to interact with anyone. And then I ended up taking myself off of all my medications, which like was truly like magic, because it's like literally in like a matter of months, I lost all the weight I had gained as a result of the medication. And I like was finally not in a fog, and I like wanted to do things, and I like felt motivation for the first time in years. Like it was so truly bizarre. And it was weird because I was like, if I didn't take myself off my medication, no one ever would have.
So you must have a strong, like that kind of experience early on must build strong intuition as you get older, because you start to trust yourself more when you probably wondered, like, should I take myself off? And you didn't do it for a long time.
Exactly. Like I had been thinking about it for so long, and I was like, no, like, it was like the thing we're talking about, where sometimes you have to make a decision. Like it's like there was someone in my house, and I'm like, okay, well, I can either stay in my house where I know there's like an intruder, or I can like leave. And like I don't know if that's better, but like I have to do something. And so it was kind of like that. And then I think like because that was ultimately like a really good decision for me that ended up being like just like changing my life so dramatically, I was like, oh, I need to take more responsibility for my life and like my happiness. And if I don't like something, I have to change that because no one else will.
Did you, were you talking to your parents about that, or were you just like, I'm just going to stop taking meds?
I was kind of talking to my mom about it, but she was very much like, well, let's like see what the doctors say. And the doctors were like, no, she needs to be on her medication, whatever. And I think at some point I was like, okay, well, no one's gonna like approve of this, so I have to just stop, and then I'll like tell her in a week once it's too late to go back on.
Gotcha. That is super, I mean, I'm so glad it worked out for you. It's super risky because of the unknowns, but I think that knowing like it's back to that idea of like there's no perfect answer except for what's good for you, and only you really know that. So once you start hearing that like intuition and that true voice, you can actually build it and make it stronger by like listening to it. And then also I feel like for very young kids, I would advise like if you are doing that, also to have the other plan, right? Like to be like, if I take myself off the meds, which don't do it. I don't recommend.
Don't just.
But let's say you were in that position, you were so like that was your only choice. you could give yourself like little, okay, if I get to this point where I am thinking about suicide, I will call this friend who I've told I'm going to show up at their house, and then they'll do this. Like having a plan, I think is the way to go. But it is very tricky because like, you don't know until you try it. And like, nobody wants to be responsible. And that's why they don't tell you to do it.
I mean, it's like, it is like literally like a bunch of adults who are just scared of like liability and literally getting sued. I'm like, I was on medications because people didn't want to get sued.
Isn't that wild that they could get sued for telling you to go off, but not forgive? Like my brother was on meds when he committed suicide. And it's like, you can't sue a doctor for giving him meds because they'll be like, well, I guess we couldn't cure it. It's like, I don't know. Exactly. You guys may have fucked up his chemicals. I mean, we don't know, right? It's like, I mean,
but you don't know.
You just don't
you never know. But it's like, but it's also just like, I know that the meds I was on were making me like really not care about like my own life in any way, shape, or form. Like I could literally tell they were like just like destroying my will to live completely.
Damn.
And it's like this really weird thing where I was like, okay, like I just couldn't possibly feel worse. Like it's like you literally get to a point where like I can't feel worse than this, and so I have to change it.
Wow, that's really I've almost in a way I do think going to therapy maybe helped you get that self-awareness because you were like, I need to do something. Like it was almost, I don't know if this is probably not actually anything based in science, but I think of myself now as like mommy, daddy, and baby, because sometimes I will feel that ego, the baby, like I'm sad, and then sometimes I need to comfort it, but sometimes I need to be like, all right, well, let's see what we can do. And it almost feels like when you describe trying to get out of depression, like you were simultaneously depressed and wanting to end your life and also wanting to save your own life, which is this like contradictory.
Like that.
But that's so beautiful because most people, it's not the cure, and I'm not saying like it's as easy as overnight or snapping your fingers, but if you can recognize that you want to die but also you don't want to die, that can help you get to the next step of like, all right, let's find a door in this room, because then you'll remember like there's another voice here. It's just not very loud, but there's another voice that wants to live. But
it's like I know that's exactly like what it is. It's so interesting, and like it's like all about like trusting your own intuition.
I recently last week I had a pretty bad breakdown, and usually I feel like around this time of year I do tend to get more triggered, so I've become more aware of my patterns. You know, it's been like have been 6 years now, so it's a little easier for me to recognize when it comes up, but it doesn't change the feeling. So I did still feel like suicidal and really panicky, and so now I have like, it's a little easier because I know it's coming. So I called my boyfriend and he couldn't really help, but I still was just like, I think what I just need to do is like have this reaction in front of someone who is able to be stable and won't freak out, which is what he did. Like he was very comforting, but he didn't try to fix it because he can't. And he didn't, and he didn't like make me feel bad. And I did just in the moment feel like I want to die, but I also knew I'm not going to. Let's just get through it. And then now I'm okay. So.
And it's like, it's so weird because like when you're younger and when you're like really depressed and suicidal and stuff like that, what you hear a lot is like, you won't always feel this way. Like you won't always feel this way.
It's like, no, skip forward to 15 years. You will still
you'll still feel this way sometimes. Yeah, just like sometimes you will. But it's like this weird thing where it's like when you first hear that, you don't know that it's true. Like you don't know that you could ever feel differently because you haven't like felt depressed and then not been depressed anymore. Like you haven't experienced that, and it's this really bizarre thing where like now I realize when I feel really sad and when I feel really down, I'm like, I probably won't feel like this next week. Like I probably won't feel this bad tomorrow. Like I won't feel this bad the day after tomorrow. Like it's like really, but it's like you have to learn for yourself that that's true.
Yeah, it's like what we're talking about, like teaching your body, and it is like, I think some of this needs to be some policy, and the way the world sees it needs to change too, because like it is totally true that I have mood swings that sometimes correspond with my like period. But which is true, but if I was to tell people like, oh, I'm on my period, and then people didn't actually take that seriously because they're like, you'll be over it next week, that could be dangerous, because it's like, I do feel this way, and if unchecked it could go badly, right?
Right, exactly. It's the feelings are real. It's like whether or not they're being like amplified or like caused by like some other factor is like different.
Yeah, it's like when there's a storm, nobody's like, yeah, but when summer comes, it's going to be sunny, so don't board the windows.
Flooding, we're not like, okay, but it will evaporate eventually. Like that's not what we say.
Totally.
Like it's kind of, so it's like, it is like you still have to deal deal with everything that's going on, even though like it's like in order to deal with it, like sometimes it's very helpful to remind yourself like why you're feeling that way.
Yeah, that's really well said. I have 2 questions about the fake IDs because I just thought of a connection that is, I don't know if you've ever thought or if it's true, if I'm digging, but you were talking about this idea of like you wanted to not be perceived, and it made me think of like this idea of wanting to be invisible or be someone else, which people relate to in high school. And then when you talk about fake IDs, you're literally creating identities for people. Was there any part of you that was like wanted to be outside of yourself, or like felt like you'd had no like what's the word? It's like mirror, like were you trying to mirror or figure out? I feel like I'm not a psychologist, so I don't know the terms, but there's like a lot of children with trauma will almost feel like they don't know what their sense of self is. Were you like looking for that?
I think definitely. It's like, it's weird because like I'm someone, I've always had the same like internal monologue. Does that make sense? Like,
yes, you are.
Like the way
yes, the voice is there. Yeah.
So the way that my head voice has been the same since I was like 5.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, but it's like, again, I think I definitely had so many identity crises, especially after like, okay, I think it was really harmful because I got diagnosed with anorexia in 7th grade, and then I was hospitalized for like 3 months. I was literally in an inpatient facility for 3 months. And I think it's like, I kind of started to see myself as like weak or sick or patient. And like, that's kind of like, because that was the identity that was projected on me.
Yeah.
And then when I wasn't sick anymore, I didn't really know like what I was doing. Like, it was like, I wasn't going to the doctor all the time. Like, there were so many things I just wasn't doing. Yeah, it was like this kind of thing where like, yeah, I wasn't sick anymore. I didn't see myself as patient. Like, no one was treating me as patient. And so I was like, well, who am I? And I think like the best way for me, or that I saw fit to figure out who I was to just like start doing things and figure out if that felt good.
So were you in a lot of clubs and activities in school?
No, never. I mean, my freshman year of high school, I was doing cheerleading, and then it was like this really bizarre thing where I was doing cheerleading, but then I started gaining a lot of weight because of my medication. So I was originally like a flyer on the cheer team, and they wouldn't officially, because there's a lot of like sensitivity culture stuff, they wouldn't take me off as a flyer, but I was just too heavy for the other girls to lift. It was like it's really funny to think about, actually.
So like, you're just like not flying, but
I'm like, it's so funny that like it was so PC that they were just literally making girls who couldn't lift me. Like, whoa. I just like can't even get over it. It's so funny to me. I'm like, that's wild.
So I was a cheerleader at Gunn, and I was I've always been I had to be a base because I'm so tall. Like, they just...
You're tall. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I'm like, I'm little. Yeah. But like, it's like, I was just getting so fat, like, because of my medication. Not even that, like, it was just so out of my control, and I had no idea what was going on, you know? But like, yeah, they wouldn't technically take me off as flyer because they were like, well, that looks bad. We can't be like, oh, you've gotten fat. Like, I think the coach was like, well, what are we going to say? Like, she got fat? No. Like, we'll just...
There's other ways to say that. Like, oh, we're going to rearrange positions and test out if you're better here. Yeah. But damn.
Anyway, I ended up quitting cheer because I just like didn't really feel wanted because there was like so many like things going on, and like girls said whatever, you know, people are
mean
how
girls.
They are. Yeah.
Did you when did this? So the ID thing, was it around this time? Like, when timeline wise?
That started
was it after?
my early junior year of high school because I went to middle college. Did middle college exist when you were in school?
Yeah.
So I did middle college my junior year of high school, and that's when that started.
And how did it like change? Like, to me, when I think of like going from not feeling wanted and kind of being rejected to like being this person that everyone's like, ooh, I need this, like, there's a little bit of control and a thrill in it. Like, did that change your outlook and how you like sort of perceived yourself?
100%, because it kind of made it so that I now had something like useful to offer, because I think it was like this thing where I didn't see myself as like, I wasn't really pretty. I really wasn't very cute in high school, like not even putting myself down, but
everyone's cute in high school, but I know what you mean of like how you see yourself.
I wasn't
just the youth and innocence, and like I feel like never mind, let's not get into this, but I just feel like everyone thinks they're ugly in high school, and it's just like,
no, I actually was, though. I can say for sure now that I actually was. Which is fine. It doesn't matter. But it's like, it's this weird thing where like, yeah, like I just started feeling like, oh, people were talking to me. People were like actively reaching out to me. I now had like something I could offer people. And then through that, like, I think it was kind of like I developed like a personality, and I like actually did make real friends who like, whatever. Like, I think people
did you ever use it? Like, or you just, anyone who wanted it got one? Or were you like did you use it like in a powerful way? Like, oh, well, if you're nice
No.
to me. Okay.
No, it's like if people like wanted like fake IDs, I would like help them get fake IDs, or like if they wanted me to buy them alcohol, I would buy them alcohol. Like it was like I was very like I just wanted like friends or a purpose.
Yeah.
I've always been like really a pleaser, you know?
Did you ever get caught?
No. No.
Oh,
I didn't
wow.
get called for fake IDs until I was in college, and a
Damn.
fake ID came to my mom's house, and she was like really mad at me, and I was like, whatever.
That's wild. Well, also because you still look really young. So just thinking that you were buying these huge cases of beer every weekend with a fake ID is like, I mean, very interesting to me. Like in a very small town, like you just like went to the local liquor store and were like,
I would go to the Mountain View Safeway.
okay.
So
the
because it
other
was, like, a
teenagers
little
working
farther
there
away.
kind of like, they don't care.
Exactly. I didn't want to like run into anyone's parents. Like I was very cautious, actually. I was like pretty cautious. And then like also like I don't know if you've ever been to Ernie's.
I don't think so. I don't know.
It's a liquor
bar?
store on
Oh.
El Camino. It's near Gun.
Gotcha.
It's like right next to Happy Donuts.
No, there used to be one. Oh, maybe that's the same. Well, no, there's one on Middlefield that was like, I don't remember what it's called, but it was near where I live. But they always, the guys in high school, it was always like the football guys who would get the alcohol. They always went there, yeah.
Yeah, so there was another alcohol store like that, liquor store like that, where that was the first time I ever bought alcohol. I bought it there.
Were you nervous at all, or was just like you didn't care? You were just like, whatever.
I think I was just kind of like, what's the worst they're gonna do? They're gonna say we can't sell to you. I kind of like was aware of that because I was like, there's not really, you're not gonna call the cops on me. You're not like you're just gonna say no if you don't want to.
And you never were turned away?
No, I wasn't turned away.
Wow.
The first time I got my fake ID taken away, I was 20 already, and it was at a
Damn.
music festival.
Damn. I mean, in a sense, that is what people always tell you when you're young. They're like, you just have to act like you're not scared. But it's like, it's true because if you have to ask, like, how do you get away with it? You're not going to. Because
Exactly.
you don't act like you're
it's
21.
like, well, if you don't believe it, they're not gonna believe it. But if I walk in, like literally the first time I bought alcohol, I was wearing I looked so young probably. Like I was wearing no makeup. I was wearing this giant like Jonas Brothers concert shirt, and and Crocs,
Oh
and
my
I literally just
God.
like walked in and I like put a fifth of vodka on the thing. They were like ID. I showed them my ID, and I like walked
Damn.
out with it, and I was like, oh yeah, it's easy.
It's also probably like, okay, I mean, not to be like, I feel like the TV version of this is like, if she was going to buy alcohol and got turned away, she would just steal it. It's like that store owner probably knows that. It's like, okay, this person is getting alcohol tonight. So if I don't sell it to her, she's going to steal from my store.
She's gonna take it, and I could just take her $20, and like we're fine.
Which is
Also,
not
it's,
a
like,
good
because-
reason, but I think it is true.
No.
Yeah.
But like my fake ID was pretty good, and so they had like good plausible deniability. Like I think it was just like the
They
right
just don't want to
amount
get
of,
in
like-
trouble. Yeah. Damn. That's so crazy because it really like you're hitting on so many things too of like just the lies that the world tells you because there are reasons that underage kids shouldn't drink and it is very dangerous. But they don't tell you all of it, and so once you start doing it and you realize you're okay, you ignore all of it. Like
Yeah,
which
well,
is
that's
very
the whole thing. I'm like,
dangerous,
when in drug education you learn that marijuana and heroin are equally
Oh my God,
bad.
yeah.
I'm like, well, you're literally just setting kids up to try heroin because it's like literally
Yeah.
like what do you think you're doing when you do that? Like it's
they're
like
not
we
being
know that
honest.
weed.
Yeah.
We know that weed is not meth. We all know that weed is not meth, and so don't tell us weed is meth.
Yeah, it's very much well, even in this like in a sense, like you are taking medication that was prescribed, but it is drugs. So it's like very hard like at that point if you're being taught, and I'm sure like drug education also doesn't like, I don't know if it's different now, but in my high school years, they weren't very inclusive of mental illness. Like nobody ever brought up like, don't ever touch drugs. But also if you prescribe, so there's these like paradoxes that aren't explained, but then they're like, if you ever touch this thing, like, recreational drugs, you're going to die. But then people
or, like,
are prescribed
literally
it.
just being like, if you try weed once, you'll be addicted and you'll fail out of school. I'm like, that's an insane thing to tell children.
You will get chlamydia and you will die.
Yeah, I'm like, that's insane.
It's still like very much, gosh, I wonder if it gives me hope that these like truths are being unearthed earlier and earlier, because it makes me wonder if like children are taking things in their own hands now. Like we don't trust the adults and let's figure it out. Like they're actually testing patterns. I don't think people should just go out and get fake IDs if you don't have the resources to support yourself. But it is a way to kind of like, you were testing your own boundaries. You were trying to open the windows and doors to be like, does this go anywhere? Is this going to lead me to something? Like,
well, I truly think the only way that people learn is literally through their own mistakes. Like it's like we do have to give people like just trial and error, and it's like that's how I learned what works for me and what doesn't, and like that's how most people learn what works for them and what doesn't.
Did you have a fake name on your fake ID?
No, I had like all of my information was the same except for like where I think my first fake ID was from Idaho. So that was it. Like, but it was like Dana. I said Dana V. Donnelly. That's my real name. I had my real birthday except for the year.
Damn. I never had the guts to do. I never thought about getting a fake ID in high school, but I ordered one from like a college roommate in my freshman year, and the first time I used it, got taken away. But we didn't need IDs in New York, so I used it in LA. So that's, I think, my mistake. But yeah, I don't know. Like, it's like that confidence thing. If you feel like you belong there, you won't. Like, I went to so many clubs underage, but I didn't need an ID for that. So I was literally just like 17 in the club. Like, I belong here, because they literally would recruit us to go, which is so bad.
Yeah, they literally. They buy
like,
you to
come here,
in.
like girls. Like,
they'll get free drinks. You'll have a table.
Drinks. Yeah, but then if I was going into a store to buy drinks, they're like, "What are you doing here?" But the thing is, I didn't buy alcohol till I was like, which is almost like a flex, but it's not supposed to be. I was scared to buy alcohol, but it's also I drank a lot, which means I just went to places where they give girls drinks for free.
Gave you alcohol, yeah.
Which is bad. It's a bad culture. Like, if anything, we should stop doing that. It's really training us to view ourselves in the wrong way.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Yeah. Not good.
When did you stop this fake ID business? Or do we miss any like interesting or crazy stories from your fake ID time that you want to share?
No, not really. I think that's it with the fake ID stories. I think I stopped once I got to college. Mm-hmm. Like, just like I got all my friends' fake IDs our freshman year, and then I kind of stopped because I was like, oh, well, we all have fake IDs. Like, I don't need to like make money at this point from anyone, like whatever. And then like I turned 21 like 2 years after that.
Nice. It is good that you didn't become the college kid who went back to sell alcohol to high school kids, because it's like that would have been, I feel like, too much. Like, that's the thing that I feel like is like people don't discern the difference. If you're in high school making mistakes.
I also knew like once I was 18.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Well, it's like the crime is different. And like once I'm 18, I'm like, this is a federal crime. I think it's like I'm also not stupid where I'm like, okay, well, I'm 18 now. I kind of have to stop because if I get in trouble, I could really get fucked over.
Yeah.
But it's like when you're a minor and you like live at home, you're like, okay, really? What's the worst that they're gonna do to me? Like, not to be. I'm whatever. Like, my parents are rich and I live in Palo Alto, and like, what are you gonna do to me? Like, nothing. Like.
Yeah, that is true. Although I think I was always really scared because I guess my mom was the one who would punish me, so I was scared of that. But there were so many parties I went to in Palo Alto where like the cops would come and they would just tell everyone to go home.
They would just tell everyone to go home. Like, literally. No one ever got in trouble for anything in Palo Alto. Mm-hmm. I remember this kid was selling. I think this kid, we were 15, and he was driving his mom. He drunk drove his mom's car without a license, crashed into a wall on the highway, and then he was in school the next day.
Oh my God.
Like, I'm like, it's just not, like, it felt so fake. Like, everything in Palo Alto felt so video gamey. Like, it felt like it was all, like, not really real.
It's like living with the bumpers on and, like in a bowling game or whatever. Are they called bumpers?
Yeah. Like, it is. It's like you're living with, like, in a bumper world where, like, you're literally being given the freedom to, like, really fuck up, like, anytime you want, except academically. Where they
I mean, when you're talking about that, it almost makes you wonder if there's a correlation. And this is all like, coming from someone who's from Palo Alto and you as well, like I don't want to diminish experience of teenage depression, but that feeling like in high school of like needing to get out of something you're stuck in, like a video game, sometimes you feel like you need to like press the reset that's where it gets so dangerous, and people think the only option is to get out of life because they don't see that there's like another way to live. They're literally like, this is it, so I guess I gotta like hit the reset.
I mean, Palo Alto does a fucking horrible job of making you feel like there's any other path for you than getting straight A's and doing a million extracurriculars and doing perfect on all your tests and getting into an Ivy. They literally do make it seem like if that does not happen, you are doomed and you will be homeless. Like, that's literally how I was raised, and that's how everyone I know was raised. And it it makes collective delusion where we're all like living this like lie because adults are telling us something that's not true.
And and I know they probably do it because they think it's like an element of that is trying to keep kids safe, right? But like there needs to be some way for them to learn about the world that's maybe like structured, but like you can't just keep them in a bubble, because then you'll never have those moments where you discover and know like your mistakes. You're gonna make a huge mistake right away, and it's gonna be like the end of it, you know?
Yeah. So many kids in Palo Alto, like their personal responsibility, like their personal sense of responsibility, like starts and ends with academics. So it's like they don't feel like anything else is really like matters other than like them going to school and getting good grades.
Oh yeah, I like cried for weeks when I got my first B in high school, because I was told like if you don't have straight A's you can't go to an Ivy, which is maybe true. I didn't go to an Ivy, but my life is like it's okay. I'm me. It's fine. But like at the time I was like, this is it. Like I don't know what my life is going to be, because now I have to do 3 more years of school or whatever, and I can't erase this B from my record. So now I've got to like shift my entire plan.
I just like wish I could go back and like tell myself. It's like, it's so weird because it's also just like I graduated high school with like a 2.9. I like went to kind of a shitty college. I didn't get very good grades there. And like now I'm in a better position than like almost anyone I knew who went to an Ivy. Like I'm doing exactly what I want to be doing. Yeah. And like other people can't say that. And it's like, it's so weird, but I'm like, I wish I could go back and just be like, you're going to be fine. Like you literally have to just like do the things you like. And because like otherwise, what are you doing?
Yeah, that's true. You have to live your life for yourself. I know these things all sound so cliche because I'm like, people told me this when I was younger and I didn't like truly understand it.
But that's because there was also so much like opposite messaging from like parents and teachers that was not in line with that at all.
Well, that's why I like, did you ever watch the Booksmart movie?
Yes, yeah.
I like that because it shows that, I mean, it's so silly, but it is like, the idea that, you can party and have fun and have good grades. And we didn't have anything like that growing up, like movies like that. It was always like the nerd, the jock, whatever. And I still knew tons of people who like weren't that way, yet we always consider them an exception, even though it's like, obviously if they exist, it exists. Everyone can't be an exception, you know?
Right. But we just treated everyone who didn't fit a mold like an exception, as opposed to like, oh, like if you fit the mold, like that's actually weird.
Yeah. Damn, that's so interesting. I love this. Okay, I want to wrap it up, but I was gonna do the 3 rule game with you, but now I'm kind of like, because last week I was house sitting my parents and I went through all my old diaries. I know you don't read diaries, but I ended up finding one that I was like, damn, I've been feeling this way for way too long. So I like sort of like talked back to my childhood self. And you were saying that you wish you could go back. I kind of want to do this. Okay, let's try it. I just want to like you give like it doesn't have to be like, you know, overly positive, but kind of like a coach talk to your 15-year-old self, like as you now.
Okay, you want me to go first?
Yeah. Oh, you go first. I can do one. I mean, okay, let me try it.
You do one.
Gosh. To my 15-year-old self, I'm going to say, look, I know that you spend a lot of time caring about what people think, and you're not wrong. What people think will affect your day-to-day life. But the thing is, you're going to grow up and you're going to like join this world where people are going to look back on this time when you were awkward and you're going to be in the majority. So you actually don't want to be in the minority of popular kids. It's okay if you are, but if you're not, be in the majority of awkward kids, because one day all of these awkward kids will grow up and you'll have more friends to choose from, because you'll actually have a lot more in common with the majority having been awkward. So just keep that in mind.
And then, okay, I would say to my 15-year-old self, like, trust your own instincts. Like, you're right. Like, whatever you think is going on is probably what's going on. And like, don't let people tell you that you're wrong. Like, when people say things that are contradictory to like what you think, like, just know that they're wrong.
I love that. Trust yourself. Yeah. Well, Dana, thank you so much for sharing that with us. Where can people find you?
I'm on Twitter at Dana D Only. I'm on Instagram at Hottest Dana. And that's it. Well,
I just realized it's D Only and not a shortened version of Donnelly. Like, I was reading it like you abbreviated it.
It is supposed to be. Oh, okay. It is supposed to be. I was just saying that so they can spell it.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. D Only. Yeah, follow Dana. Super funny. You can follow this podcast at Tell Me Anything Pod, and follow me at Larissa T on Twitter and Instagram, and find me on TikTok. I guess I'm on TikTok now. Okay, bye.